Alabama running backs. We got an update for you with our buddy Clint Lamb. We're going to talk maybe a little recruiting. And how about the guy that coordinates the recruiting? Getting a contract extension. What does that mean for Alabama? And Clint's defensive depth chart is out on covercrimson.com. Like, subscribe. Thank you for being here. We're live. Get in that comment section. Roll Tide, everybody. Let's get this show started. Clint Lamb and Mick Gillispie with you here on covercrimson.com. Make sure that you guys are a subscriber. Give us a thumbs up. We talk to you live every day now with football practice rolling on and Alabama getting closer and closer to kickoff. And Clint, yesterday, the news kind of broke that Courtney Morgan got a contract extension. And I'm going to give you my thoughts, and I want to hear what yours are. My initial thought was, well, we haven't gotten a class signed out of Courtney Morgan yet. But then you realize, hey, USC was coming after him, and he obviously got a pay bump from that, and good for him.
Well, I mean, yeah, and to me, it's still well-deserved because, the fact that he helped close on Ryan Williams in the last class, we know he's going to be a big part of Alabama's offense. That was, Courtney Morgan had a hand in that. The fact that you ended up securing transfers such as Keon Sabb, like the Washington guys, it's like, okay, I'm sure Courtney Morgan had a lot to do with that too, but that's following your head coach, Kalen DeBoer. So, I'm not going to, say that's like a huge Morgan thing, but, the fact that you added Keon Sabb after losing Caleb Downs, the importance of that, I think has a lot to do with Courtney Morgan. And, just in today's college football, and Chris Marler and I were talking about this earlier in that episode, All Tied Up. It's going to be our second episode. It's going to come out later this afternoon. So you'll hear me probably reiterate some of these things, but, the GM role in college football is becoming so important because that guy acts as a buffer between the money that players are wanting and the coach. Like if that guy didn't exist, and I use this example, you'll hear it twice a day. If you watch both videos, I apologize, but it's just a great example. When my buddy William Ming was going through the recruiting process back when we were in high school, we were in Nick Saban's office. He was talking about him leaving the NFL and what he liked about, being on the college game in comparison. And he said one of the things that really frustrated him as a coach is that every day somebody else was in his office, another player was in his office asking for more money.
Right.
And, he didn't like, he didn't like that it was all about the money, but B, he didn't like the fact that he was looked at as that guy because the players had a better relationship with him than they did the GM. But he was always like, I'm not that guy. I coach you up, get you where you need to be on Sundays. But if you're talking money, you need to be talking to the GM. Well, in the NIL era, you would either A, have players getting upset at a head coach because they don't like the money that they're getting, or if you're a head coach, it's like, hey, I don't control that. Go talk to boosters. You don't want to send your player to boosters or anybody else NIL related to be handling that business because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. So that was your two options before like this GM role was kind of created or came up. And so I think that it's very important as acting as that buffer for a head coach. It takes a lot off their plates, and you see people copying the method all over the place. And it's clear Courtney Morgan is one of, if not the best in this type of role in all of college football. There's a reason USC wanted him. I mean, how much success is Kalen DeBoer having over on the West Coast in California, right? I mean, Nick Saban was having plenty of success too, but it's like, man, they're trying to keep that pipeline. Or USC, Nick Saban retires. They're like, hey, we can cut off this pipeline a little bit, start getting some of these guys to stay in state. Courtney Morgan and Kalen DeBoer, with their familiarity with the West Coast, they go to Alabama and they're doing a lot of the same things. And so USC was trying to figure out a way to kind of stop that a little bit, kind of like Texas going after Steve Sarkisian after all the success that Alabama had in Texas those couple of years. And, it ended up not working out because Courtney Morgan's extremely loyal to Kalen DeBoer. And I think that's also important.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Did Saban have anyone that was even close to this?
No. I mean, there might be, give me some time to think about it, and maybe, but not in this type of role, not having this big of a hand on everything. Like Courtney Morgan's trusted with so much. Granted, this is an evolving process as far as NIL and transfer portal. I don't know if it was around long enough for Nick Saban to, have really needed someone like this, but he also probably had that Bill Belichick mentality where he wanted kind of control over everything himself anyways. So he might have had somebody acting in this sort of role, but their responsibilities were probably vastly different than what Courtney Morgan's doing now. And I think that you probably, you need that GM type of guy. Like I said, there are plenty of benefits for it. There's really no drawback, especially if you trust the guy, and just the relationship between head coach and GM needs to be strong. And I will say, it feels like Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan are very close. So it's a different era of college football, but I think Alabama's kind of on the forefront of figuring some of these things out.
Yeah, because you mentioned Nick Saban. I heard that he was really irritated by this. Like you said, hey, I'm probably not going to want to play in the bowl game, which was like the college football playoff, if I'm not getting this playing time or if I'm not getting this money. You can imagine how those conversations probably went with Coach Saban. And then, having someone like Morgan there to kind of slide in and handle that part of it. And you're just worried about coaching, hey, the money part of it's the money part now. And here's a great question. You guys get your questions in. How long before players get contracts and the public knows their salary? That's a good question.
It's coming. It's coming sooner rather than later. They're going to try to, probably a little too late, but they're going to try to embrace what's going on in college football. And that way you can kind of control it, or at least, kind of focus it in a little bit. Cause right now, I mean, you really, at a certain point in the NFL season, guys aren't doing the whole knocking on the doors because their contract is what it is. And you can't, you stop the negotiation process with a lot of players in a lot of those types of situations. And so there's kind of, you can focus on the football for a little while. In college football right now, I mean, right before the biggest game of the season, which is, the Rose Bowl, there's rumors about guys asking, hey, I'm not playing unless I get X amount of money. That's just what's the truth to those rumors? No idea. Don't know any player specifics. But if that is true, and I don't think that's completely outside of the realm of possibility, then you've got to get a handle on that, because that's the last point in time where you need to be having those discussions. But from an agent's perspective, that's when you want to, because that's where you probably have a lot of leverage if that player is heavily relied on. So you've got to have some parameters put in place at some point. I think that contracts and just kind of being locked into something, and hey, if you want to negotiate more money or whatever after the fact, but I don't know exactly how it'll work, but they'll do some of that stuff for sure.
Guys, covercrimson.com. Sign up for $1 right now and join us. We had a great debate on this, still kind of going on the site right now. But check it out. We got a lot of really cool stuff coming, some exclusive content, not just written content, but videos as well. So we're building that right now, and would love you guys to hang out with us there, take advantage of that introductory rate, and really just be part of what we're doing. We appreciate you and being here too. Like and subscribe, thumbs up, and get in the comments section. You guys have done a good job of that. Today, this afternoon, AK Deer, running back, Quitman, Mississippi. We kind of feel like On 3, 24/7 Sports, all the people that follow recruiting, Clint, feel like he's going to pick Alabama. Now, this guy was a commitment to Ole Miss and then decommitted. Ole Miss still in the conversation, Mississippi State in the conversation, but this feels like it's going to be an Alabama fit. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't end up a 5-star. Some people were telling me he's a 5-star already on some of the sites, but according to what On 3 is the number 2 running back in the country and would be a great fit for Alabama.
Yeah, everything that you want in the position, just the versatility that he provides. He can bang between the tackles. He can do your off tackle stuff. He can beat defenders to space. He's got the home run hitting ability. He can catch the football out of the backfield. Everything that we talk about with, 3-down running backs and all that stuff. I mean, this guy's got it. And, maybe to an extreme that maybe some of the guys that we've seen in recent years don't have. And we've talked about that with the, running back position and how it's kind of, you've continued to have really good players there pretty much every year, but maybe the talent drop off has been, somewhat noticeable in recent years, or you've had a different style of player with like a Jahmyr Gibbs, who's obviously a first round talent, extremely explosive, and you can do a ton with him, but he wasn't the traditional Alabama running back. A guy like Deere, I mean, he can be that guy. And I think just in Kalen DeBoer's offense and what he asked out of that position, where he wants to be extremely versatile and do a lot of different things, there's nothing that you will need your running back to do that Deere can't do. So he would be a huge pickup for Alabama. He'd be huge for the recruiting class from a recruiting rankings perspective. Kind of tough to, you would think it'd be tough to criticize the in-state recruiting when they're number 2, but if they can jump to number 1, it's going to be really tough to criticize the in-state recruiting. So obviously would end up being a big pickup, and we'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah. So we'll find out there. And I have seen where publications have him as a 5-star, not on 3 yet, but be interesting. He's going to do that sometime today. And hopefully he picks Alabama, because Alabama's lost some guys. I mean, they lost a linebacker to Tennessee. They lost a couple defenders to Auburn, which has been a surprise, but the class is still up there. I mean, if they get this guy, they're going to be knocking on being number 1 again. They're still number 2. And then, keeping an eye on Ty Jackson out of Florida. He's someone that we've been talking about for a long time that Kane Womack really likes. And now there's a spot open, and you never know with recruiting, Clint. This is the other part of this. You don't know if, hey, you've committed and all of a sudden the communication isn't there because they're going, you know what? Maybe somebody else that they're talking to fits the scheme a little bit better, but they're not going to kick you out, and then you bounce. Or if it's like somebody that you really like and you're just surprised by it, which both are scenarios. And then the other part of this, you're going to see Alabama losing players to some of their big rivals because they're going to overpay to take away from Alabama, even if they don't necessarily love that guy, or maybe it's just because it's one of those things. And I shouldn't say maybe it's just because it is part of it that they want Alabama to take the hit as they improve too. And that's the NIL world of recruiting.
Well, I mean, and people, I don't think people realize a lot of it's you're battling over a player, but you're also battling over a narrative too. What could Auburn claim when they got those 2 guys to flip? Mm-hmm. And that's Alabama doesn't have any of the top 10 players in the state of Alabama. We do. We're coming. It's going to be Auburn's show from, in the very near future. When Ryan Williams decommitted after Nick Saban retired, the panic, the fact that he could end up joining Cam Coleman in Auburn, what's that narrative? And the fact that Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan and all those guys battled to get Ryan Williams back in the fold, what message does that send? Hey, Kalen DeBoer can close on some pretty darn good recruits too. And Ryan Williams is going to be a huge part of what Alabama does in the future. That's a huge win for them. So, like, as I said, you're battling for players and the talent that they have, but you're battling for narratives as well. And that's something that, you'll always see. You end up losing certain guys. We know that, we know that these guys are really good players, and they're going to be good players for, Auburn. They're going to be good players for Tennessee. It does not mean that the world is falling apart. Nick Saban, he lost some recruits too. That ended up happening. He lost some recruits and got them back. Cyrus Kwanjo. Just the list goes on and on. Yeah. So it's like, just that's part of recruiting. And with the money factor, the fact that it's so involved now, things can fall apart for you really quickly as far as, where you think you stand with a guy compared to where you actually are. Yeah. Guys won't even visit a school and they'll commit because of the money involved. We've heard of guys who have swooped in at the last second, picked guys up from the airport and got them to where they're at, and they end up selling them on the program. And that's that. Money is involved in this, and it's a huge part of it. And that's just going to continue to be the case.
And then my final thought on Courtney Morgan, and I am glad he's back, but you got to win Alabama. That's always been my biggest concern about Courtney Morgan, not just shooting from the hip here. I'm just telling you, it's great getting all the California guys and all the 5 stars and all that, but you better get those guys in the state of Alabama.
Well,
that's important. I thought he was doing that. And then you have, Antonio Coleman flip, and then, Derek Smith flips. And then you're like, man, then you look at the commitments. You got to get the Alabama guys too.
Well, and but this is what I'll say. I heard this critique about Freddie Roach, for the last couple of years. It's like the guy can't close on elite defensive linemen, and people thought it was a Freddie Roach problem. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. This guy can recruit every other position, and he's a phenomenal recruiter with those guys. But the guys who are going to actually be coached by him on a day-to-day basis, they don't want to play for Freddie Roach. He can't close on those elite recruits. And it's like, obviously there was something else there. It's scheme related, and it was scheme related. The two gapping stuff, the slow playing it, it's not glamorous for defensive linemen, but it's kind of like, do we really think that, okay, once you get into the state of Alabama, anywhere outside of the state, Courtney Morgan can build relationships. Kalen DeBoer can do it. He can sell guys, but for some reason, because these kids have Alabama on their driver's license, they're not going to want to come to Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, granted, if you're a Hugh Freeze, you might, send the message. These guys aren't prioritizing you enough. And that's what can hurt you. You're an in-state guy and they care nothing about you, even though that's very rarely the case and very rarely true. But it's like I've said, I don't think there's enough evidence of that right now, simply because 8 of the top 10 recruits in the state are defensive players. If some of them were offensive players, who know what could happen. I think that as far as playing in Kalen DeBoer's system and in his offense, that'd be a lot more desirable. There's still kind of a wait and see approach because probably not a ton is known about Kane Womack at this point. Once you start getting that established, once you start getting more balance as far as offensive talent versus defensive talent, who knows what can happen, but it's just a very small sample size. I wouldn't be panicking on it yet. If you want to have that as a question mark until it actually gets addressed, that's totally fine. But, I just don't think it's anything worth making any sort of sweeping assumptions about at this point.
Let's talk about running backs. Latest on running backs during the camp to get to kickoff. And we're talking about A.K. Deer, running back of the future. What about the running backs for right now?
Well, it seems like they're a lot more healthy than they've been. We've heard about guys who are being held out, guys wearing black non-contact jerseys, going through drills, but being limited stationary bikes. Daniel Hill was, seen in a sling during the fan day. He was back in a normal regular jersey, participating in the drills. All of the other running backs were back. The only thing is Jam Miller was wearing a black no contact jersey. That's the only difference. I don't think he's in any danger of missing week 1. But as far as you're missing, potentially sometimes 4 guys like they were for a little bit, and then 3 guys, during the scrimmage, they were able to get pretty much everybody back. And while they might not be 100% yet, a majority of them are, and it seems like they're going to be pretty much ready to rock and roll for week 1.
Yeah, it's exciting, man. It's crazy how close we are to kickoff now. I'm excited on one hand, and then, selfishly, as I try to put together this football show that I do on radio, I'm going, oh man, it's coming so fast. I can't slow it down.
It is coming fast. And obviously I just hope that the season doesn't go by as faster than the off season has, because it felt like that way, last year. It seemed like we were week 1, MTSU, Jalen Milroe getting, his first start of the year, all that stuff, all those storylines. And then a blink of an eye, they're playing in the Rose Bowl, and it's the final play in overtime, and they're getting stopped. And it's like, where did that season go? Hopefully that's not the case this year. And we can at least, enjoy it a little bit more. It slows down. But as far as getting here, man, I feel like, even since we started this show, which was about 2 weeks ago, coming up on 2 weeks, I feel like it's been 2 days. Even now it's just flying by.
Yeah. Can you believe that today was the last media viewing day from scrimmage? Any other thoughts on that? Final practice so we can get out there and look at these guys.
Yeah. Unfortunate. I'd love to be able to see a little bit more, but that's, it's in season. They're preparing for opponents. There's a lot of scouting involved, a lot of installment on a week-to-week basis, things they're going to be doing. So you got to maximize every second you get a practice. And I totally understand that. But the access has been phenomenal. And I'm sure we'll probably continue to get some of that more in the future. But I don't care about it as much, because we're about to see it live on a football field with another opponent as well. So, it's going to be, we're right here, Mick.
I'm excited. Good news too. Xavier Brown with the clubs off of his hand. I'm sure you were excited about that.
Yeah. going to be a lot easier to catch footballs and bring in interceptions. I mean, you can be phenomenal. You can bat down a lot of balls with a club, but if you want to have some game-changing interceptions, which we're fully anticipating, at least to some degree from Kane Womack's defense, it's pretty tough to do with one hand. And if you can do it with one hand, you probably should be playing receiver and not cornerback.
Yeah, it's just crazy how, like, all of a sudden, what was this, practice 16 today? I mean, like, how did we get there?
I mean, that's actually this entire camp has been a lot of fun to witness. Just watching the positions, watching the battles, even though, you know, we only get to see so much, it's warm-ups, but watching the improvement just from a technique standpoint. If you're paying attention to the offensive line, if you're paying attention to the cornerbacks, to the receivers, there's so much from a technical standpoint that you see, especially from those young guys. Like the last time I was out there for practice, the improvement I saw from Noah Carter between the first day and, you know, the last day was crazy. Just from a technique standpoint, he looks more comfortable. He doesn't look like a fish out of water. So that's going to be that's going to be a major part of this, but you have to be impressed with how they've developed.
I'm impressed by the fact that we're going to be like at a football game in like a couple weeks watching these guys, and then it becomes like a totally different thing. What's the difference? I guess just for laymen like me, what's the difference between when you're practicing to get ready for the season as compared to when you're trying to install a game plan and getting ready?
Oh, man, you know, you're a lot you're focused on you know, during the camp settings, during the spring. You know, it's not as much about keeping guys healthy in the spring. I mean, if you get a guy banged up, you know, you got plenty of time to get that guy back 100% healthy. So it's you got a lot more contact. But at this point in the off season, with game week coming up, you know, just I guess less than a week, you've already got them starting to install some things, or at least the coaching staff at the very least is starting to take a look at some things. You got Western Kentucky in week 1. I'm sure there's a big focus on that, but I think, you know, you also might be looking at some stuff that Wisconsin might be doing, what Georgia might be doing, and some of these opponents down the line, and going ahead and getting yourself prepared where by the time you actually see it, the week of that game, it's not the first time you're seeing it. And so I think that's a big, important part of this stage in the process now. And then next week, you're not worried about nothing but Western Kentucky. I mean, it's one game at a time, like it's always been. And, you know, you'll kind of take it from there. But that's one of the big things that was always beneficial about having a Clemson or a Virginia Tech or a Michigan or a Wisconsin or whoever was in week 1 is you could typically keep guys focused. It wasn't really looking towards games 3 and 4 at all. All of your focus was on, hey, we got to win this first big one with an opponent like, you know, Utah State or MTSU or, you know, no offense, but Western Kentucky. I do think, you know, the week before you're probably looking ahead a little bit from a coaching staff's perspective, and just it's not, or you at least got a portion. Is maybe some of your analysts who are going ahead and getting ahead and doing some things. But next week, like I said, everybody's focus will probably shift towards Western Kentucky.
Yep. All right. Let's talk about your latest post on covercrimson.com. And again, guys, don't forget, we want you to be a part of that. Just $1 right now, covercrimson.com, message board, insider information, exclusive video content coming. We got a bunch of stuff. We're building this thing, and obviously you guys are a big part of that. But Clint, you do the depth chart. I love looking at your depth chart. You got your defensive depth chart up right now. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it just went up. You know, I won't reveal too much about too much. I mean, obviously there's a lot of information. I want you guys to go over there and read it. I go in depth about it, but you know, some things that I found interesting when you actually look at the roster, you know, you've got your 1 technique, 0 technique, you know, nose guard, and then you've got your 3 tech defensive tackle. You know, different body types, they're asked to do different things. Obviously, the nose guard is going to be double teamed a lot more. Got to be able to hold up at the point of attack as far as your run defense a little bit more. Your 3 tech's probably going to be your better pass rusher, very attacking style on the outside shoulder of the guard. But when you look at the roster, really the only 2 what I would call true nose guards are Tim Keenan and Damon Payne. But I think Jaheim Otis and Tim Smith, they can play both interior spots pretty equally. And so when you start looking at the other guys like Hunter Osborne, James Smith, Edric Hill, Jeremiah Beeman, these guys are all, if I had to put them somewhere in like an ideal role or position, it would be at that 3 technique defensive tackle. But at the same time, if you got Tim Smith or Jaheim Otis as your projected starter at defensive tackle next to Tim Keenan, and then you got Damon Payne at the nose, you don't want to list them really in two spots. So from a roster standpoint, it might look a little different, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if you saw Tim Keenan, you saw Damon Payne, both playing quite a bit of nose tackle, nose guard, but you also are getting Jaheim Otis and or Tim Smith some reps there as well, especially to create a path for James Smith to get some action, especially on passing downs. And I think he's going to be so important. Might not be from week one. I don't know if they're going to come out the gate swinging with this guy. I know the coaching staff has been very impressed with his ability. They want him to work on his consistency. You got to do the little things right. You got to be able to hold up as far as the run is concerned. But when you let this guy get in one-on-one opportunities and let him just rush half a man and put pressure on the quarterback, he does it as well as anybody, any interior defensive lineman on this roster. And I think that that's just too valuable to have sitting on your bench for the entire year. So I can, we talked about LT Overton at the bandit spot and, him kind of being a guy who could maybe sub in on passing downs. I think a guy like James Smith is possible that, your Tim Smith or, a Jaheim Otis might slide to the nose in some of those passing situations. You might see James Smith come in as a 3-tech. And you might get LT Overton on the field at bandit. And between those three guys and having just a stable of quality pass rushers at that wolf position, you can get a pretty good, pretty consistent pass rush and maybe try to generate some sacks, but more importantly, generate some turnovers.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, and I think that's what we want to see. A lot of turnovers, a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and you don't want to see the busted coverages because there's going to be some guys that these guys haven't played together. I mean, you're talking about the cornerback spots, none of these guys except Jaleel Hurley. And he so far, I mean, our intel is saying that he hasn't really had a great camp, so, maybe that turns around, but going to be interesting. Good stuff though. I love looking at it because you start to get that mental picture of like what this defense is going to look like. And then the better news is that we really haven't had any injuries. Like there's been years where you could throw that depth chart out there and then crumbled up and throw it away because so many guys are hurt. Part of that was that Saban liked a real physical practice, scrimmages and all that stuff, right? But That's also what made the team tough when you got to, the games. At the same time, if it's not going to help you at all to have your best players hurt. And I just feel like it feels like there's a different philosophy there, but you wonder how good these guys are going to be making tackles early in the year when, you haven't been as physical.
Well, I mean, I'll say this, losing Josh McMillan and Dylan Moses before the season even started a few years ago. And now you've got two true freshmen there at inside linebacker. How much did that completely change the outlook of not only Alabama's linebacker room, but their entire defense and their entire team? When you're playing Joe Burrow in Tuscaloosa, some of the home field advantage that you have is kind of offset by the fact that you don't have two inside linebackers with experience who can take advantage of that. And it's possible that Christian Harris and or Shane Lee, it would be an or Shane Lee, would have eventually ended up winning a spot next to a guy like Dylan Moses. But, he would have absolutely been out there, and with his closing speed and just the athleticism that he brought to the position, he would have been very valuable in that LSU game.
Yep.
But, that's something that happens in preseason camp, and then everything ends up looking a lot different. So, Alabama up to this point has been able to avoid anything like that, and we'll continue to knock on wood and pray that continues because, I mean, this defense, it looks like it's going to be pretty good. There will be some growing pains. I guarantee you there will be some, an adjustment period under Kane Womack and kind of his expectations on game days. And, there's going to be some growing pains as far as if you got Xavier Brown out there. I love the guy. Think he's going to be an impact player for Alabama in year one, but he's going to be a true freshman. And so if he's making a mistake, if he screws something up and it causes a big play, just understand it's a learning experience. If you look back a few years ago, Kool-Aid McKinstry had plenty of growing experiences in year one. Tyrion Arnold, plenty of experiences in year two where he was growing and had, at some points just got absolutely torched. And they both ended up being first and second round picks and really, really good players for Alabama. So be patient with some of these guys. But I think, as guys get more comfortable, guys get more experience, the secondary gets used to playing together. I think it's going to end up being a really good unit and a good group. So Just want to, exercise caution and just enjoy the process.
Yeah, who would have thought that Arnold would have been drafted before Kool-Aid?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I say upside, man. The NFL is all about it. Kool-Aid was really, really, really good player. Think he's going to definitely provide a ton of value in the second round. I think he's going to end up being a starter for a very long time.
Oh yeah.
But just sometimes even the guys who are ready quickly, and this is one, it's kind of a situation with Jalen Mbakwe versus Xavier Brown. That was kind of my argument going in. Xavier Brown's going to be a heck of a player. He was a more college ready guy, in my opinion, and he's going to be in the starting lineup. I wouldn't be shocked at all if by year 3, I mean, Jalen Mbakwe is already starting to make some moves up the depth chart right now, but especially by year 3, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he was in that starting lineup, balling out opposite Xavier Brown, and then when the NFL comes calling, they both end up being highly drafted. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if Mbakwe ends up being the higher drafted too. Yeah,
check all that out. We'll keep that updated for you at covercrimson.com. $1 right now, guys, to sign up for the website. Clint, our show is presented by MyBookie. We've all been there before. A weekend trip to the casino canceled because real life came calling. MyBookie's new and improved online casino is here to change the game. Dive into a truly realistic casino experience featuring the latest in slots, progressive jackpots, and live dealer action, all from the comfort of your own home. The MyBookie Casino provides a Las Vegas experience when the action is in your hands and you don't even have to wear pants. Start at MyBookie today with a generous sign-up bonus using the promo code NEXTROUND, and a revamped loyalty program ensures a host of exclusive VIP perks. The more you play, the more you win with MyBookie, and we appreciate them at MyBookie for supporting us. Final thing, Clint, before we wrap it up, Bama basketball is going to play an exhibition game in Huntsville, Von Braun Center, October 28th against Memphis. I'm pumped up, man. I just want to see these guys out on the court. This is the most anticipated basketball team in the history of Alabama, and I'm even wearing my shirt today for those guys. Roll Tide.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it too, man. I feel like, the fact that it's in Huntsville, that's up near my stomping grounds. I'm from Athens, Alabama. And, the fact that it's Memphis, it's not some exhibition game against, a super inferior opponent. Memphis has got a good program. And I'm excited to see how they end up looking. But yeah, I have not been this hyped for we're talking about football season getting underway in, about 10 or 11 days. But if you're an Alabama fan, you're also anticipating and looking forward to basketball season as well. So it's a good time to be an Alabama fan.
All right. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Again, appreciate everyone for being part of it. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Comment section. Good to see you guys as well. For Clint Lamb, I'm Mick Gillispie, and we'll be back tomorrow. Clint, noon tomorrow? Are we doing it noon tomorrow? What do you got there on
noon tomorrow, brother? Can't wait.
Do it noon tomorrow, and we'll talk to you guys then. Thanks for hanging out with us, and Roll Tide.